Hello, and welcome to this session from wherever you're joining us today. Well, as you know, it's the first day of the summit, and I hope, like me, you've already bookmarked sessions you'll be joining this week. Personally, I'm looking forward to the session tomorrow on ESG and sustainability, especially, again, having been criticized by my 17-year-old daughter that people of my age are just not doing enough. Anyway, we're not going to talk about ESG today. We're going to talk about APIs. Now, the term API has I've heard it quite a few times around the world, but I think there's still a lot of misunderstandings about what they are. And I often hear people say they're a solution looking for a problem to fix. Now, over the next 45 minutes, we'll hear from a bank and a couple of corporate treasurers on their experiences of using APIs. And is it really a bad thing that they're a solution looking for a problem to fix? I bet many of you out there do have problems that need fixing. Now, a bit of housekeeping, as always, audience Q&A, really important, really helps make this a really engaging and informative session for you and for us. Make sure that we don't fall asleep following a boring old script. There's a box to the right-hand side of your screen with a tab for Q&As, and feel free to post questions as we go through the session. Otherwise, we may run out of time and don't get your question answered. We will keep them confidential, so feel free to be as honest and as open as you want to. A reminder, this session is being recorded and will be made available for replay on the event platform by the end of the day, and you can see it again, I think, for the next 14 days. And a reminder, get engaged with the ACT on social media. We have a very active LinkedIn group. You can follow us on Twitter at ACT Update and tweet using the hashtag ACTAC21. Now, before we get going, I want to make some introductions. My name is Naresh Agrawal, and after over 30 years working in Treasury, I now provide policy and technical support here at the ACT. A couple of the areas that I focus on are technology and cash and payments, and I feel that APIs have a lot to contribute in this space. Joining us, and in alphabetical order, we have Abdullah Dahman, who's the Business Manager, Transaction Banking Services at ADCB. We have Ahmed, who runs Transaction Banking Product and Channel Implementation at ADCB. We have Elviss, who's the Senior Treasury Manager for Etihad Airways. And joining us from Switzerland with a European perspective is Janko, who's the Treasurer for Autoneum. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, APIs have only really been discussed the last few years. So I'm going to put forward a few hypotheses. First of all, I assume they're a recent development. Secondly, from my own personal experience in Treasury, I assume that implementing solutions like this can be both time-consuming and expensive. And finally, I'm guessing we have a myriad of standards that makes it hard to decide which one to back. Now, Ahmed, I'm going to turn to you first. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, your role at the bank, and also, am I right in some of the things that I think about APIs?
Thank you, Naresh, and good morning to everyone. My name is Ahmed. I've been with ADCB for over 10 years right now, managing different roles in the transaction banking space. I currently look after the product development and channel implementation, which mainly takes care of the digitization plan of the bank and the API adoption across different industries. Look, yes, to answer your first question, a lot of people think that APIs are fairly new in terms of technology, which is actually not true. They've been around for a very long time. First, let me take a step back and explain in simple terms what an API is. So it's nothing more than technology that allows systems to communicate specific information with each other. And the reason I'm using the word specific is going to be explained further in my next example. In addition to sharing specific information, APIs also allow the command function between different systems. So if I can use the example of Booking.com, which has been around since I think 1996-ish or around that time. Booking.com is obviously, as you know, a platform where people can go and book their holidays and what have you through different hotels. They don't have all the databases of all the hotels saved at their end. That would be completely mad. And more importantly, they don't have the database of the real-time information around the availability of the hotels and the room rates and what have you. So what Booking.com basically is uses APIs with the different hotel providers, and through Booking.com, a user can go on a real-time basis, find out the price, the size of the room, the availability, the view, and everything through what we call an API call between Booking.com and the hotel provider. In addition to the information, so that's the example that I would like to share in terms of the information sharing between the two systems, the real-time information sharing between the two systems. The second one is with regards to the commands. So once you view the rates and the rooms available, you would like to do the actual booking of that particular room. So you enter a command on Booking.com, which is also driven by an API call to, let's assume, a Marriott or a Four Seasons, and the actual booking happens. So that's in simple terms what an API in the real world looks like.
So just picking up, I guess one of the things that tells me is it's not predominantly a financial services product.
Yeah.
And that I guess a lot of people working for their companies, these companies are already using APIs to connect to customers and suppliers, not necessarily from a financial services perspective. Okay.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
And then just picking up on some of the other things, are they difficult to implement? Hard?
Not really. Like I said, it's been there for a long time right now, and like any other technology, it continues to evolve and progress to become cheaper, more efficient, and easier to integrate. So, speaking about the financial services, and I'm not going to steal the thunder from my colleagues because I know that Abdullah is going to be speaking about some use case examples that we've done at ADCB. But with the financial services, we have, as an industry, I think, took time to adopt this technology, mainly because of the apprehensions that the banking industry usually have on information security. But I think the adoption for the past 20 years has picked up significantly, especially in the region here in the UAE. So there's a lot of examples in terms of information sharing, like I said, on through the ability of connecting to systems through the APIs, but also commands, which would be further elaborated by Abdullah using the example of the virtual accounts as part of the API integration we have with some of our clients.
And just actually, maybe we'll come towards it at the end, but I was going to ask a question about standards, but we'll pick that up at the end. Sure. When you talk to Treasury folk about APIs, what do you find? You've talked a bit about the sort of reluctance about sharing confidential financial data. What other things do you find people are hesitant? Are they right to be hesitant? What sort of controls are in place to mitigate some of the risks that these APIs may be creating?
Certainly, security and confidentiality is something which is at the utmost importance for many organizations. It's very important for us as bankers as well. So as I said, the security aspect of the API, whether it's information sharing or a command-based API, has really significantly improved in the past couple of years. So in terms of information sharing, the most basic APIs that we currently provide our clients is bank statement information, balance information. We've got on the retail front our retail rewards program, which is the ADCB touchpoints, which can be used in platforms such as the food delivery service platforms, where your bill gets discounted based on how many touch points is available in ADCB. Again, using the example of Booking.com, these food service online platforms don't have the database of how many touch points do you have all the time. It's a call that happens to ADCB servers and the information is being picked up. So yes, the security aspect, I think, has definitely been improved significantly, continuously evolving, as I mentioned. And at this point in time, I think there hasn't been any major breaches when it comes to this technology.
And when we talk about, I said at the very beginning that APIs people sometimes think are a solution looking for a problem to fix. Are we talking about there are 5 APIs, 5 million? How would I find, a if I had a problem, I want to know if there's an API that would fix it. How would I go about doing that?
I think APIs eventually will be touching every aspect of every business because of the fact that it's so seamless in terms of information sharing and the ability to. I'm sorry, I think I lost you, or you lost me. Okay, sorry. A lot, they're almost in everything that we use today. So like the examples I use, the online food delivery service platforms, the hotel booking platforms. Google uses it significantly, Facebook. So a lot of us are not aware of what is actually playing in the background, but in reality, it's all about APIs. And in the banking sector, whether it's the client wanting to only view information which is available in the bank's end, like I said, the balances and the statements and the number of accounts, or even the OD facilities which are currently in place and what have you, or process commands. So again, I'm trying my best not to step into Abdullah's part, but a lot of our clients have currently the ability of opening and closing accounts from their premises without having to speak to anyone in the bank. And that's also part of the whole API technology, which is being implemented. So is there millions? I think there is more than millions and growing in an incredibly fast space. Well, sorry to hold you guys off with Naresh, but we've lost him. So if you can give us a couple of seconds to sort this out and get back to you. Thank you. Hello again, and apologies for that technical issue. We unfortunately couldn't connect with Naresh, so I'm going to be continuing the discussion with my colleagues, doing both the questions and answers wherever I have to. So bear with us, please. I hope you got the most of what I mentioned earlier about the APIs and the facilitation that it offers to our clients in terms of information and command functions. I'd like now to move to Alex and ask him on his experience with regards to the API technology and maybe share what has been done so far in that space. Alex, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you. So by way of background, I've been working for Etihad Airways, the national airline of the UAE, for coming up to 4 years. I would characterize the Treasury here as a large multinational and quite well-developed or very well-developed Treasury. Before that, I worked for smaller companies in the real estate space. And I think it's fair to say that Etihad's Treasury is probably in its infancy with APIs. We haven't implemented a huge number, and I'll explain about the ones we have implemented shortly. But one of the reasons for this is due to the nature of the Treasury here. So before I joined, a lot of work was spent, and I'm grateful it was before I joined, on implementing Swift and a very well-developed TMS system, which interfaces with SAP, SAP more on the finance side. So we already have a very good channel of communication with our counterparty banks, of which we have a large number. And I think around about 95% of banks, in terms of numbers, are connected with us on Swift. And probably in terms of payment volumes, a much higher percent, because it's only the smaller banks who are not connected with Swift. So I guess with that background, that's why we have not probably implemented as many APIs as some other treasuries may have. And I think the reason for that is a lot of the focus of banks, at least from a treasury perspective, initially has been on implementing APIs, focusing around, I guess, big wins, which is around giving balance updates, live balance updates, or live transaction updates, but also on the flip side, if you want implementing probably repetitive payment flows using a front end within the business. I think the value for us is slightly lower there because we have this Swift connectivity. We generally get very up-to-date details from our banks, but also the sheer volume of our payments. We process thousands of payables and receivables on a daily basis. And the value I get, I suppose, of us being able to hit a button and seeing if a particular receipt has receivables come in, or indeed a particular payment has been made, is perhaps lower than my previous companies, where in real estate you're processing large payments to contractors or expecting large rental receipts from your tenants, where I think that would be much higher value. And certainly my last employer didn't have a TMS in place. So having a front end which could present API data to you at a low cost, and I think that's an important thing to bring up. APIs generally are quite low cost to implement. It is incredibly valuable, and I do see that for small treasurers, an API system could fulfill much of the benefits that you get from a TMS, but at a cheaper cost base, and probably with a much quicker implementation, and certainly much quicker in implementing Swift connectivity.
Thank you, Alex, for that. I think a question Naresh had for you was, are you seeing any plans to expand the API adoption that Etihad has in the future? Do you think it's going to stop somewhere? I mean, some of the questions that he probably had in his mind is about the future plans that you guys have as a company.
Yeah, well, firstly, I actually should have mentioned it previously, but we have the one API that I know we've implemented recently. I think Abdullah is going to give some more details on later, but relates, as you mentioned, to opening and closing bank accounts. And I think that's a good example of probably the direction that we may move in. We've recently concluded a cash management RFP, and a lot of the banks are now focusing, having implemented these big wins, I guess, of the balance and statement reporting, are now focusing on more bespoke uses of APIs, and definitely we see value there. The API that Abdullah is going to discuss was very quick to implement into SAP, and has driven a lot of value at Etihad. So I think, look, we may well still implement some APIs to present live transaction data, probably more from a treasury transaction perspective. So just tracking deposits going, and particularly our debt service. But it's, I guess, other things have taken priority, but certainly I'm going to use the phrase co-creation. We're co-creating APIs with our counterparty banks for specific use cases, and it doesn't have to just be to do with transaction flows. It can drive other actions which traditionally you may have had to pick up the phone, or you may have had to fill in a form, and taken a kind of 1 or 2 week process to do with your bank. But also it's interesting to see that banks are willing to develop APIs for you if they feel there's a use case for it. And of course, for the banks, it's great because if you develop something that's applicable to more treasuries, that you can then offer it to more of your customers. So it's kind of a win-win, mutually beneficial situation.
Thank you, Alex, for that very, very insightful feedback. If you don't mind, Janko, I think we were supposed to move on to you, but if I can just ask Abdullah to jump in, since we were just talking about his work with Etihad and implementation around some of the APIs. So Abdullah, the mic is with you.
I mean, thank you so much for that. Basically, as Alex has stated, it is one aspect of the API, whereas the virtual account opening and closing. And the case study that I wanted to cover had more areas that we had implemented and showed the journey that we had with the client. So in this case, this is a significant client in terms of being an IT or a technical arm of the government responsible for the local e-wallet called Nukhudi. And this project was a joint effort with Dubai Land Department as well to work together in finding a solution around the owners association accounts registered and governed by Dubai Land Department. So if you want, Ahmed, I can go on into the journey here and that would cover everything, or do you want specifically only on the virtual account opening and closing piece?
Maybe we can speak about the virtual account, since it's also the common API that we built along with Etihad.
Yeah, sure. So I would say this was the anchor in us, having this synergy and tie-up with Dubai Land Department, in having this system set up, because that was the most important thing, in having the virtual accounts set up in order for this to be the identifying piece for every real estate unit. And that was the main problem area that they had in terms of how do we, number one, identify, process, and most importantly, reconcile, while having this very efficient ecosystem running with all these different players in it as well. So I think the virtual account opening and closing being done through APIs has helped in realizing that. Otherwise, if we looked at any other different way in managing that, it would have had a lag and caused an issue in terms of having that operational efficiency that we're looking for. So here we're talking around close to 60,000 plus transactions annually, and you have a very dynamic requirement to have the virtual accounts open and close. So APIs is the perfect solution for it.
Yeah, I'm really sorry about that. Luckily, none of you work for a multimedia company, so I can embarrass them, but I won't. So apologies. I wanted to sort of pick up on with Janko, unless I've missed that bit already. Having Alex heard from you about how you've looked at APIs, Janko, it'd be great to hear, from a different company in a different region, a bit about how you see APIs, similarities, differences, to get a sort of more global view on how these are being used.
Yeah, more than happy to do so. Thank you. So, hi everyone. I'm Janko. I'm heading the Treasury operations of Autoneum. We are Switzerland headquartered, but globally active tier 1 automotive supplier. Means we supply heat and noise insulation parts directly to the OEMs worldwide. Much different size of industry, of course, but nevertheless, we have around 1.7, 1.8 billion Swiss franc in sales last year, and are active in more than 25 countries. So wherever you have automotive in place, that's where we are. So again, a global business, and that's what also is driving to a certain degree the API strategy on our end side. What did we do? For us, the start was really indeed that one of our core banks came to us. I think I can mention the name. I mean, we know many banks are working on this. Some are faster, some are slower. It's JP Morgan, which approached us and said, Janko, we could support you with API solutions. And I said, well, interesting, but I guess you can submit only data flow and I need to consume it somehow. And they said, well, we are going a bit step further. We are also supplying you with the front end. That was our initial kickoff. From a system end side, we are an SAP company, globally as ERP, globally as treasury management system, fully integrated in the same instance, which gives us a good level of transparency and I think a nice big tool. As we heard before, also we are using a Swift connectivity to most of our banks or EBICs in Europe. Nevertheless, as you know, SAP is an oil tanker. To steer it around is not that easy, especially if you have for treasury something you want change, then it depends also on the big ERP governance, so to say. Now, our business is not real time, and nevertheless, treasury has some requirements. And so we said to JP Morgan, that's a nice idea, and nevertheless, we can't easily integrate it into SAP. That will take some time. And they said, no problem, we offer you an Excel plugin. And although we all want to avoid Excel, in this case, it was a really good enhancement of the Excel ecosystem. So having SAP, but missing the real-time part where we might need it in some instances, perhaps, this Excel plugin was an easy and a fast adoption of this nice technology. What did it bring?
So, Janko, can I just make sure I heard it correctly? We're talking about a piece of Microsoft software, Excel, which I would assume pretty much everyone listening today is using and broadly familiar with. Did you need special training on using this add-in?
Yeah, and that fits exactly. That's what I wanted to mention. It was an easy adoption. It was really fast. It took us a few weeks, and most likely that was a few weeks because the IT guy needed to be around for the certificate installation. Other than that, it was really fast and easy. And cost-wise, just some internal resources on IT, and luckily JP Morgan saw us as one of the Swiss or European pilots, so no big topic on that one. And that brought us then immediately a real-time balance view, which was of course great for all the North America business, which is 40% of our business. And of course they enhanced it further. So are there millions of APIs? I just can say with JP Morgan we are looking at a few interesting ones. There might be more on the road with many banks, but of course I can just say that we are very happy. We also get this API TMI award. That was of course a nice recognition of the project we did. And it helped us mainly to intensify the conversation with the CFOs. So it means we are proactive and say, hey, you just received some dollars here, you received some Canada dollar here, some Mexican pesos. Can you send them home? Can we do a repayment of loan? Did you realize? And they said, oh, Janko, how do you know? So the discussion and the understanding of the business and the discussion with the business is much more intensifying. So to answer your question at this point of time, it was pretty fast, pretty easy, and at this point of time, not so expensive. And this balances and payments topic is a start, but of course, they are working on different ideas, like we heard about virtual IBANs opening. They are looking at multi-bank API so that we have more banks retrieving data and delivering data in a SIME plugin. Or interesting, we have a missing transparency about signatories in the countries. So dual signature, of course, hopefully with their banks, but who are the people? Are they updated regularly? And that is something we can't see in e-bankings, we can't see in our TMS, right? So this is something we are currently looking at with JP Morgan. So yeah, I'm very happy to see that a lot of banks are going this road now.
And again, one of the things I've taken away is that I grew up with things like MT940s and Swift messages like 942s, which were only running at particular times of day. And am I right, Janko, that the way you're using it, if you feel that at this moment in time, you want to balance now from some place in the world, you can go in and pull it now rather than wait for it to cycle through the Swift, rigid framework?
Yeah, it's about transparency instantly. That's it. Yeah. So, and that helps us, for example, because we maintain with HSBC, they are also delivering data in this JP Morgan multi-bank plugin now. We maintain some legal units in difficult countries, difficult from us to manage because far away and not so easy to repatriate cash. India, Argentina, Mexico is a bit easier. But so the advantage is that also in those countries where we anyway are missing transparency, they are not in SAP yet, we can get this instant view and say, hey, now let's take up the discussion again. We had it last month. Why is it not progressing? You see the cash balance. What can we do? So it helps us to also increase transparency, especially on those regions which are not so transparent today in our pretty nice ecosystem, which is unfortunately not yet covering the full world.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to ask a very quick question to Ahmed, and then I'm going to turn to you, Abdullah. Ahmed, Janko's talked about one of your competitors. Do you see these other banks as being as a problem for you deploying your APIs? Janko's also talked about the challenges of finding. It sounds like there's loads out there. Can you tell us a bit about how your bank sees other banks deploying APIs and how you're helping customers, use this rich, ecosystem that's out there?
Sure. Well, actually, it's the complete contrary. We are learning from each other. We at ADCB, both locally and regionally, have almost bi-weekly meetings with banks which are adopting this technology. And we're learning from each other, like I said. I don't think it's going to be something any of the banks will try to withhold as information, because at the end of the day, we are living in a fairly digital space where ecosystems are being promoted both with clients and competitive organizations. So yeah, not at all. I think it's going to be beneficial working with our competitive banks.
Okay, I guess it's refreshing then to hear banks, collaborating and not trying to isolate corporates into, siloed relationships. That's really comforting. Now, I did say I'd turn to Abdullah. We've heard from a couple of, quite large organizations that have got quite well-established IT infrastructure. Could you tell us a bit about what you hear from your own clients? And I know we talked a bit about the case study. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I think the case study, being an IT-based company, could be a bit misleading to the audience, thinking that you need high levels of IT sophistication and that's the only way. But that's not true. I mean, we've heard from Janko and Ahmed and the others on the panel that this is something that's very flexible and can be adopted by different clients. Though our case study is with an IT-based company, that made it easier for us to evolve and really look at different innovations under the digital space, and that paid off. But then, yes, to answer your question, we've seen that increase in terms of clients in different segments, both in, I would say real estate, aviation, retail, and going forward in different areas, where they realize that it is a fast way of sorting out your efficiencies, as long as you can identify where they are. And from there, you can layer up and you can build onto it as well. So for the case study that we had, we did start with, APIs on virtual accounts opening and closing. We now are moving into debit and credit notification, balance confirmations, even payments through API, and many more in the pipeline as well. So that mindset is there to adopt more, and that's leading to us exploring and implementing more as well.
I'm going to steal one of Alex's words, this sort of co-creation. I just want to explore very quickly around the relationship. Is it folks like you going into corporates and trying to sell them these APIs? Is it mainly corporates understand what these APIs and are coming to you to say, this is my problem, what do you have in your estate to fix it? What is it, all of those or more of one versus the other?
I would say it's a mixed bag. So you would have cases where it's all about the dialogue that you have with the client. In many cases, it's identifying something. Sometimes even the client doesn't realize that is an efficiency, or them asking. I've seen cases where clients, just because the competitor is adopting APIs, they're like, why not us as well? So that's also a win-win in that situation. So it's a mixed bag. We have cases where clients do realize there's an issue and maybe they are a bit apprehensive in moving into APIs, thinking that it's a big IT leap, and we have to help them in that and say, no, that's not really the case. And we go step by step with that. We have cases where the problem statement is much bigger and it's not a quick fix that you can get to. So we do devise a phased out approach and saying, this is how we plan to solve that issue. We have cases where it's the client who themselves come, like you said, and saying, I think API will solve this problem. Can you guys do something about it? And we say, yeah, okay. And we can work based on our experience to accommodate it. So like Ahmed said, I mean, it's something that's been there. We have it in our personal life and it's been there for a long time. It's just now becoming more visible, or people realizing that it has a lot of areas it can benefit in terms of efficiencies and controls.
And again, just reflecting on what I've heard, I mean, I said at the beginning, I've been in Treasury 33 years. And when I compare what I do at home with my technology versus in a corporate environment, often there's a big disconnect. And I've spent many years talking to banks, and the banks have said, that is just the way it is. They're running off mainframes, trying to make a change for me would be hard and expensive to implement. And I've grown up with a mindset then that says that in the office, if I have a problem, by and large, everyone else has got the same problem. It's not being fixed because it is unsurmountable because of regulation, the cost, the legacy infrastructure. Is part of the challenge for people out today, trying to educate people my age to say, actually, these things can be fixed?
Yes, I believe so.
Challenge.
Yeah. No, I understand your point of view, and it is. I would say it is a mindset that is not fully justified. It's just a hurdle that we put on ourselves, because I've noticed in my own experience, in many cases where when we meet corporate treasurers or CFOs or people who make these decisions for the corporates, and we say, in your personal life or in your daily dealings, you are dealing with this. It's easy to use, and then we make that transition into a phase-wise approach and saying, why don't you try to adopt it on the corporate side? And then obviously, like Ahmed said as well, the security side is a concern, and that has improved significantly in the last years. And only with the trial and adoption, that's when people realize. And I think it's a joint effort. So as more people come onto it, so let's say, for example, okay, I just want it for balance inquiry for now, and that seems to be safe because I'm not really transacting. I'm specifying what information can be shared. Eventually, that's the first step in my view, and that eventually grows into other areas. And that has been how the technology has been all along.
Okay, super. Janko, I'm going to ask you a very quick question just around the sort of mindset question. Was it hard to get buy-in from senior management to have these conversations and develop and deploy APIs?
No, honestly, it was really pretty fast because it was run centrally. We did not need to involve local capacity of people. It was the dialogue between Treasury and the bank, and internally with the IT guys, which took some time, but it was okay. And so honestly, once you communicated the use case of it and made it clear, then it was an easy one. Of course, the question is if the legal units in our case like it so much, because we increased the transparency for headquarters. But to summarize briefly, it was really a good effort, and it was not too complicated. It was really doable.
Okay. So we've only got about 5 minutes, and I did want to. We've got a couple of questions, and maybe question one is having an ERP a requirement to implement APIs? No, Janko and Alex, you both have ERPs. Maybe Ahmed, a question for you. Do you need to have an ERP to use APIs?
To use them efficiently and properly, yes, definitely.
But if you've got a very simple accounting system, I'm guessing you could still use that to connect to the bank using API. So it's much more around, what I'm hearing, the bigger you are, the more you'll get from it, from the APIs.
Yeah, I mean, going back to Alex's point, the companies as big as Etihad, go for whole treasury management systems. And it obviously comes with the size of the operations of the treasury in that company. So yes, I think from an API perspective, size doesn't really matter, but the complexity and the use of the APIs would be different between large and small corporations, definitely.
Okay, super. I'm gonna ask you each to give me one final thought to people listening today. I'm going to start with Alex first.
Yeah, so I think my experience of APIs thus far is have a look at your systems landscape, identify where you're strong, where your weaknesses are, ascertain if you can fill that gap using existing infrastructure or connections, and if not, APIs could fill the gap there. So going back to what Janko said, if real-time analysis of receipts, payments is critical to you, APIs can solve that issue, and they're quick and easy to implement. Okay,
Janko, to you.
Yeah, speak also to your banks, see what is available in regards to solutions. You will realize that there are sometimes really big differences from bank to bank. So you need to speak clearly to them what they can offer, and then see how and you want to adopt the one or the other solution into your systems. But don't get too much confused with marketing, to really focus on what Alex mentioned, on the needs you have to close a gap perhaps in your treasury environment.
Okay, super. And then talking to the bankers, so Ahmed, first with you.
Well, the most thing I would like to say to the listeners is that compared to the traditional, way of building a product and selling it to a client, APIs allow for co-creation between the clients and the banks, and it all comes to what we were talking about earlier around connecting at the ecosystem level, where we're almost sharing information on a daily basis between the clients and the banks. So yes, it's a very interesting space to explore. Like I said, a lot of what we do on a personal level already uses APIs without us knowing it. The banks were a bit of late adopters, but we're definitely picking up the pace as we go.
Abdullah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I would say don't assume that it's hard or expensive or it's alien. I mean, it is something that's proven to be cheaper, easier, more efficient, dynamic. So I mean, it's only limited, I would say, to your mindset. So if you limited yourself, then that's where you won't get the benefit out of it. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, we're going to wrap up there. I hope we've effectively debunked some of the myths that exist around APIs and given you some real life examples of how they can make your life better. I'm not going to say easier, because my experience is management just want more and more, and it's faster and faster. But that's a different question. It definitely sounds like the relationships with banks are changing, and that they understand how multi-bank relationships can work. And if you're not talking with your banks about how they can help you, I think sounds like you're really wasting a valuable opportunity. So first of all, thank you all very much for the questions. I'm sorry we didn't get around to answer all of them, but you can, of course, continue the conversation in the networking environment. A reminder, you can watch this session again. They'll be available at the end of today and for another 14 days after today. Feel free to compare notes and exchange thoughts in the discussion zone. Please remember to fill in the speaker survey. And finally, big thank you to Abdullah, Ahmed, Alex, and Janko for sharing their experiences, to ADCB for sponsoring the session. And I have to say, thank you for putting up with my media provider and the bit of gap where I didn't appear. I hope that didn't ruin your experience with this session. Goodbye, enjoy the rest of the conference, and look forward to seeing many of you later. Thank you.